Welcome to the Pencil Bob channel. I hope you enjoy my stories.
It started on the first cold weekend of December, when I dragged the ladder out from the garage and hauled a bin of tangled Christmas lights to the front yard. My plan was simple: get the display up, have a beer, and not think about it again until January. I didn't realize Karen was already watching from her front window like a hawk sizing up prey. She was outside before I'd even plugged in the first strand. "You know, those patterns aren't very traditional," she said, hands on her hips. "They're lights," I said. "They turn on. That's as traditional as it gets." Karen squinted at the arrangement I'd started, spiraling strings of blue and white, with a few red bursts at odd intervals. "Do you even realize what that looks like from across the street?" "I'm guessing." "Festive? Don't play dumb," she said, lowering her voice like we were sharing state secrets. "That is not a normal design. It's coordinates, or something." I laughed. "Coordinates? For what?" "Santa's landing strip." Her expression didn't change. If anything, she leaned in closer. "I've seen patterns like that before. In documentaries. They use them to send messages." I thought she meant Morse code, but the way she said "they" made me pause. "Who's they?" She looked over each shoulder like the mailbox might be bugged. "Aliens." I almost dropped the strand of lights. "You think my Christmas lights are extraterrestrial texts?" "I know they are," she snapped. "I can tell by the spacing, the symmetrical red bursts, their markers, and the white spirals. They're directional cues. You're broadcasting to something out there." I stood there, not sure if she was serious or trying out a weird joke. "But Karen's not the type to joke. You might want to ease off the documentaries," I said. That didn't sit well with her. She pulled out her phone like she was about to take photos. "If you think you can hide it, you're wrong. I know what you're doing, and I'll figure out what the messages say." And just like that, she marched back to her house without another word. The next evening, I was finishing the display when she reappeared, notebook in hand, scribbling furiously while staring at the lights. She kept pacing back and forth on the sidewalk, muttering numbers under her breath. Every few minutes, she'd stop, tilt her head, and jot something down. "What are you doing?" I finally asked, recording the transmission sequence. I had to bite my lip to keep from laughing. "You're actually decoding them?" "I've got most of the first section already," she said without looking up. "You're clever, but you're sloppy. It's almost poetic, the way you hid the call signs." "Call signs for whom?" "Your friends." This was getting better by the minute. "My friends? The ones from Alpha Centauri?" She stopped writing, gave me a dead serious stare. "Don't mock me. I've been studying this for years." "You think you're the first one they've sent?" I wanted to tell her the coded lights came from the clearance bin at Home Depot, but I figured winding her up might be more entertaining. "Well, if you've almost cracked the first part," I said, "you should probably stick around. I've got more planned for tomorrow night." She nodded like I just confirmed her suspicions. "I will." The following day, I purposely rearranged half the display, swapped the red bursts to the opposite side, twisted the spirals tighter, and added a blinking green line across the roof. From my living room window, I could see Karen storming out with her notebook again, flipping through pages like she was checking reference material. "This is a completely different sequence," she shouted across the street. "Yep, new message," I called back. She looked almost giddy. "You're escalating communications." "Sure, let's go with that." She scribbled so fast the pen nearly tore through the paper. Then she said something that made me pause. "I'll have to send a reply tonight." "A reply? To who?" "To them, the ones you're talking to. If I can piggyback on your transmission, they might respond to me too." I didn't know if she was actually delusional or just so deep in the role she'd convinced herself it was real. Either way, I couldn't resist feeding it. "You do that," I said. That night, long after I'd turned off the lights and gone inside, I found something in my mailbox. A small, wrapped box with a note taped to it. The handwriting was frantic. The letters slanted in different directions. "For your contacts. Frequency marker enclosed. They'll understand." Inside was a cheap keychain flashlight with colored lenses taped over it. I laughed so hard I almost dropped it in the trash. But then I thought, what if I kept this going? What if every day I changed the lights, just to see how far she'd take it? The next morning, Karen was waiting at the curb when I went to get the mail. "Did you deliver it?" she asked. "Deliver what?" "The marker. I left it for you." "Oh, right," I said, trying to sound serious. "Yeah, they got it." Her eyes widened. "They responded?" "I think so. You might see it in tonight's pattern." She didn't say anything else, just turned and sprinted back to her house like a kid late for class. I went inside already planning the most confusing light sequence I could manage. That evening, I put the lights in total chaos, zigzagging lines, random blinking spots, and a pulsing center. I stood outside with a cup of coffee, pretending to check for loose bulbs. Karen came out within minutes, wearing gloves and clutching a new notebook. This is advanced, she said, almost breathless. They're answering questions I haven't even asked yet. Oh yeah, they're chatty tonight, I said. She glanced around like the sky might start opening up. I'll need to adjust my reply. You've upped the frequency. Sure have. Her excitement was almost unsettling. She wasn't just playing around. She was invested. Deeply. And something told me she wasn't going to stop. Later that night, I heard a sound outside. At first I thought it was the wind, but when I peeked through the blinds, I saw her crouched near my front lawn, shining a red flashlight directly at my display. She was aiming it like a sniper, turning it on and off in measured bursts. I opened the door. What are you doing? She didn't look away from the lights, replying, They need to know I'm here too. You can't just, they'll see me, she said, cutting me off. They'll know I understand. I stood there, baffled. Karen, it's 2 a.m. She clicked the light one last time, then turned to me with a smile I'd never seen from her before. Wide, almost triumphant. It's working. I think they got my name. I almost told her she was out of her mind, but then she added something that made the hair on my neck stand up. They told me, You're not who you say you are. The next day, there was a folded note sticking out of my mailbox. The handwriting was the same erratic slant as before. I'm beginning to understand their syntax. I'll leave longer messages tonight. Please keep your transmission stable for at least one cycle so they can absorb my reply. I laughed out loud. Stable wasn't part of my plan. If Karen wanted stability, she was going to get the exact opposite. That evening, I swapped half the bulbs for different colors and strung up a new set that blinked in no recognizable pattern. I even added a slow fading strobe just to mess with her timing. When I plugged it all in, it looked like a Christmas display designed by a caffeinated raccoon. At 6:03 p.m., her front door opened and she stepped out with a small wrapped package. She walked straight to my mailbox, opened it without hesitation, dropped the package inside, and scurried back to her house without even glancing my way. Inside was a bundle of folded index cards covered in tiny, cramped writing, each line numbered like she was composing paragraphs in some alien grammar. The first one read, To the vessel above the Orion Belt, I acknowledge your signal and am prepared to assist in the contact protocol. I am friendly. I am human. I am ready to learn. I almost dropped the cards from laughing. Then an idea hit me. What if I made her think her messages were working? The next morning, I set my alarm early, went outside, and rearranged the lights before sunrise so she'd think they had responded immediately. By the time I was drinking coffee on the porch, she was already out front, phone in hand, snapping photos like the FBI had sent her to gather evidence. She spotted me and marched across the street. You got my cards? I sure did. And you sent them a translation already? She said, pointing at the roof. The flashing pattern. It's different. They're confirming receipt. Looks like it, I said. Her eyes lit up. Do you realize what this means? That they read really fast? She didn't even acknowledge the sarcasm. They trust me now. They're opening up. I need to send more detailed coordinates so they can approach without military interference. I shook my head. Karen, you can't just... But she was already walking away, muttering to herself about approach vectors and secure landing sites. By nightfall, another package was in my mailbox. This one heavier, wrapped in tin foil like she was trying to block scanners. Inside were hand-drawn maps of the neighborhood, with red X's marking certain rooftops, including mine, and strange symbols in the margins. I didn't know whether to be entertained or concerned. That night, I made the lights even weirder. I hooked them to a cheap music controller I had in the garage, one that flashed them in erratic bursts that didn't sync with anything. From the street, it looked like total chaos, perfect for convincing her the aliens were trying to say something urgent. At exactly 9:17 p.m., my doorbell rang. I opened the door to find Karen standing there, breathing hard, clutching another bundle of papers. You need to stop changing the frequency so abruptly, she said. They're getting agitated. I can feel it. I think they're fine. She leaned closer, lowering her voice to a whisper. They've been watching you for a long time. Longer than you think. And now that they know I'm here, they'll want to meet me in person. Great, I said. Let me know how that goes. She shoved the papers into my hands. Give them this. It's a full introduction and my qualifications. They'll see I'm valuable. I looked down at the pages. Half were written in blocky capital letters, the other half in what looked like made-up symbols. The next morning, I was startled awake by loud banging on my front door. When I opened it, Karen was standing there in her bathrobe, hair a mess, eyes wild. "They sent me a dream," she said. "Karen, it's 7 a.m. They told me you're hiding something from me. That you're not just a messenger. You're one of them." I let out a long sigh. "Karen, I promise you." "No," she said, cutting me off. "Don't bother lying. I've already contacted someone who can help. They have experience with extraterrestrial infiltration. They'll be here soon." I crossed my arms. "Who exactly did you contact?" She smiled in a way that made my stomach tighten. "You'll find out." Around noon, a white van pulled up in front of her house. No logos, no plates I could see from my window. Two men got out, one in sunglasses, the other carrying a clipboard. They didn't come to my door, but Karen met them on her lawn, gesturing wildly toward my house, pointing at the lights. I could hear fragments of her voice over the cold air. Transmission hub, confirmed pattern, suspected origin. The men didn't stay long. They just nodded a lot, wrote things down, and drove away without looking in my direction. That night, she was back at my mailbox. Another package. This one just had a single note inside. They've agreed to let me take the lead. By now, I was deep into the game. I wired in an old timer to make the lights change sequences every 40 minutes. Karen spent the entire evening running between her window and the curb, jotting notes, waving her flashlight at the display, and muttering to herself. Just before midnight, there was a knock on my door. When I opened it, she wasn't holding papers this time. She was holding a walkie-talkie. "They'll be contacting us directly now," she said. "You'll need to listen for my instructions." "I'm not doing that," I said, already trying to close the door. She stuck her foot in the gap. "You don't understand. If you mess this up, they might think you're hostile. And if they decide you're hostile, what? They'll vaporize me." Her eyes narrowed, or worse. She handed me the walkie-talkie, turned, and walked off into the dark without another word. I stood there staring at it, wondering how far she was willing to go. The next morning, I had my answer. There was a letter taped to my door. "If you refuse to cooperate, I'll have no choice but to take control of the transmissions myself." I didn't see Karen for a full day after that note, which should have been a relief. But I knew she wasn't giving up. People like Karen don't retreat, they regroup. Sure enough, the following morning I stepped outside to find a police cruiser idling in front of my house. A young officer was leaning against the hood, flipping through a notepad. "Morning," he said as I approached. "Your neighbor's concerned about your light display." I almost laughed. "Concerned? She believes you might be engaging in, unauthorized communications." "With who? Santa?" The officer didn't smile. "She says extraterrestrials." I rubbed my forehead. "And you came out here for that?" "We have to check on any call we get," he said. "She claims she's documented coded transmissions." I pointed to the lights. "They're Christmas decorations." He scribbled something in his notepad. I figured, "But you might want to tone it down." "She's already called 3 times today." By the time the cruiser left, Karen was back at her window, staring like she just won a round. That night, I made the display even more ridiculous. The spirals were back, along with flashing bars across the roof. I wanted her convinced the aliens were answering me constantly. Sure enough, at 8 p.m. she was outside, waving her flashlight at my house like a desperate lighthouse keeper. I leaned against my porch railing. "Karen, the cops already told you it's nothing." She didn't stop signaling. "They're in on it," she yelled back. "You don't think they just let something like this happen, do you?" "Karen, you're shouting at my gutters." She stomped over to the curb in front of my yard. "I've called other people who aren't afraid of the truth." "Like who?" "Agencies," she said with a grin. "Ones you've never even heard of. And the news, they'll want the exclusive." The next morning, I woke up to find a local news van parked 2 houses down. A reporter and cameraman were talking to Karen on her lawn. She was gesturing wildly toward my roof, pointing to hand-drawn diagrams spread across a folding table she'd set up. From inside my house, I could hear her voice carrying over. "This is ongoing communication with an intelligence not of this earth. And he's part of it." The cameraman eventually aimed his lens at my house. I shut the blinds and made coffee, figuring they'd get bored. But when I stepped outside an hour later, Karen was standing in my driveway holding a microphone. "Do you have anything to say to the viewers about your contact with alien life forms?" she asked, shoving it toward my face. Yeah, I said. I think you need a hobby. That made the cameraman chuckle, but Karen didn't flinch. They're watching you right now, and they know I'm the one who can translate for them. They're not going to need you for much longer. By evening, she'd moved from media appearances to flat-out harassment. I started finding notes on my door and in my mailbox, pages covered in frantic scrawls, strange symbols, coordinates, and accusations that I was withholding transmissions. One note read, "Stop corrupting the messages or I'll have to intercept the signal directly." Another, "They've told me what you are. You'll regret trying to deceive me." I decided to push her even further. The next night, I programmed the lights to flicker in a repeating 3-second burst, then go dark for 5 minutes, then burst again. From the street, it looked deliberate, almost like a signal. At 11 p.m., the doorbell rang. When I opened it, Karen was standing there in a long coat, eyes blazing. "I know what that pattern means," she said. "Oh, what's it mean?" "It's a distress call. You're in trouble." "Sure," I said. "Big trouble from the elves." She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "If they think you've betrayed them, they'll come for you. And if they come for you, they'll come for all of us." "Karen, it's Christmas lights." She jabbed a finger toward my face. "Not for long. I'm taking over tomorrow." The takeover started the next day. I caught her in my front yard while I was on the phone, dragging an extension cord across the grass. When I stepped outside, she was trying to unplug my lights from the timer. "What the hell are you doing?" I demanded. "These transmissions are dangerous," she shouted. "I'm rerouting them through my system. I can keep the channel open without your interference." "You're trespassing. You're risking the planet." I grabbed the cord out of her hand and shoved it back toward her. "Get off my property, Karen." She stepped back, glaring. "You have no idea who you're dealing with. They've been giving me instructions. Detailed ones." I took a step toward her. "Stay away from my house." For a second, she didn't move. Then she smiled, turned, and walked away, too calmly. That night, I saw her outside with a clipboard, pacing back and forth under the street lamp, speaking into her phone. I couldn't hear most of it, but one line carried clearly through the cold air. "Yes. Tomorrow night, I'll be ready to bring him in." I barely slept that night. Every creak of the house made me think she was outside with that damn flashlight again. By morning, my nerves were on edge. At 7 a.m., my doorbell rang. I didn't even check the peephole, just opened the door expecting another lecture. But there was no one there, just a small paper bag sitting on the mat. Inside was a single note. "Tonight, be ready." I spent the day on alert, keeping an eye on the street. Karen never left her house except once, to drag 2 large plastic bins into her garage. The lids were duct taped shut. By evening, I decided I wasn't giving her the satisfaction of another light show. I left the display off entirely, but that only seemed to make her bolder. At 10:42 p.m., there was a sharp knock on the door. I opened it halfway, and that's when it happened. Karen shoved hard from the other side, forcing the door open. Before I could react, something heavy slammed against the back of my head. The world spun. My legs gave out. I felt cold air, then rough hands dragging me across pavement. When I came to, I was in a chair. My wrists were zip-tied behind me, my ankles lashed to the legs. A single bare bulb swung overhead. The air smelled like dust and motor oil. It had to be her garage. Karen stood a few feet away, wearing gloves and holding a stack of papers. "You can stop pretending," she said. "I know what you are." I groaned. "I'm your neighbor. You've lost your mind." "They warned me you'd say that," she replied, pacing. "But I've got proof now. Patterns, coordinates, and your refusal to cooperate." "You hit me with something," I said, my voice thick. "A precaution. If they've been controlling you, they might try to make you escape." I pulled against the ties. "Karen, untie me before this gets worse for you." She slammed the papers onto a workbench. "It's already worse. For all of us. They told me you're supposed to prepare a landing site. Instead, you've been corrupting the messages. You're stalling them." I tried another angle. "Fine. Let's say you're right. What exactly are you planning to do here?" Her eyes narrowed. "Get the truth. And if you won't give it to me willingly." She picked up a small metal tool from the bench. "Then I'll extract it." I actually laughed. "You think you're in a spy movie?" Her face hardened. "Laugh while you can." She moved closer, and for the first time, I saw just how far gone she was. There was no hesitation, no self-awareness, just raw conviction that she was the hero in some cosmic mission. That's when I made my move. I kicked hard at the side of the chair. It tipped over, slamming into her legs. She yelped, stumbling backward. The zip ties cut into my wrists as I thrashed, but the chair hit the floor just right, cracking one leg. Karen recovered fast, lunging for me, but I rolled hard, smashing into a shelf. Something heavy fell. Tools, a box of screws, a can of paint thinner. The can burst, its contents spilling across the concrete. "Stop," she shouted, grabbing at my arm. I twisted and drove my shoulder into her. She fell backward into the puddle of paint thinner. The smell hit both of us instantly. I used the broken chair leg to saw at the zip ties until my wrists came free. My ankles were next. By the time I stood, Karen was scrambling toward the door. I grabbed her arm. "This ends now. You have no idea." The garage door flew open. 2 police officers stormed in, weapons drawn. One yelled, "Hands where we can see them." I stepped back, hands up. Karen froze, eyes darting between them and me. "We got a call about a possible assault," one officer said, scanning the scene. "From someone inside the house." That's when I noticed. Her landline was on the workbench, receiver off the hook. In her panic, she must have hit redial or some emergency line. The officers cuffed her without much discussion. She started screaming about alien plots, transmissions, and my role in delaying the invasion. It all unraveled quickly after that. Turns out, my run-ins with Karen weren't her first incidents, just the loudest. She'd been harassing other neighbors, breaking into yards, even mailing evidence to government offices. For years, the neighborhood busybodies had brushed off her behavior as eccentric but harmless. Not anymore. Once the police report went public, even her closest defenders vanished. People who once smiled and waved now crossed the street to avoid her. The neighbors who had whispered, quirky but sweet, now spoke openly about harassment, broken windows, stolen mail, and nights of constant screaming. Every story dug her deeper into disgrace. The court dates started piling up. She had 3 separate criminal charges for kidnapping, assault, and unlawful confinement, plus civil lawsuits from neighbors claiming property damage and emotional distress. The legal notices stacked on her kitchen table like a paper mountain she couldn't climb over. Each hearing brought more reporters, more cameras, more humiliation. Her lawyer argued frantically, but the evidence was impossible to ignore. Statements from the police, neighbors' testimonies, and even a few recordings of her shouting about alien communications made her defense laughable. By the second week, her finances were in chaos. Legal fees drained her savings. She sold her car, her furniture, anything that could raise cash quickly, but it barely made a dent in the mounting court costs. The judge scolded her multiple times for failing to appear on time, for interrupting proceedings, for ranting mid-trial about transmissions and signals. Each outburst made the courtroom murmur and the press scribble notes eagerly. Meanwhile, civil suits from neighbors began to settle in their favor. She was ordered to pay damages for broken fences, ruined gardens, and years of harassment. Garnished wages and frozen accounts followed. Her social life evaporated. Even her few friends who had stuck around quietly slipped away under public pressure. By the time she left the courthouse one afternoon, cameras captured her walking to a battered rental car, her face pale and expressionless. Her house went up for sale, the windows darkened and the yard left wild with overgrown weeds. The "for sale" sign looked absurd next to the chaos she had created. The movers came early in the morning, loading boxes in silence. No goodbye, no wave, no last look at the neighborhood she had terrorized. I took down my Christmas display the next day. The yard looked bare, quiet, almost too quiet, but I kept one small box of lights in the garage, tucked in the corner, just in case. Because sometimes, you don't need aliens to make life interesting. And sometimes, the scariest thing in the neighborhood is standing right across the street, thinking they're untouchable, until the law proves otherwise.
I would like to thank you for watching the video to the end. To encourage us to make more videos, please like, subscribe, comment, as well as share.